So welcome everybody. It's the second day of our Festival des Cinq Continents, and it's a great moment for us because this is the opening of a wonderful exhibition. I want to thank you, really thank you so much, Fabiola Jean Louis, to have accepted to show her works here. So you can see some photographies, and well, we wanted to also to show some dresses because you have also some sculptures, but well, we decided to, yes, because of the volume of this small room, that it would be better to just show these photographies. And you just said yes, finally it's used the place, you know. And I'm so happy to welcome you with Wynnie Lamour. Wynnie, thank you so much. We are colleagues because Wynnie belongs to NYU, and she is the founder of the Haitian Creole Language Institute. And so for many reasons, we are so happy you participate in this festival. Let me just remind you that this festival is in partnership with the Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie. And this year, our focus is on Haiti. So welcome, Fabiola, welcome, Wynnie. We'll listen to you during an hour of discussion.
Thank you. So I'm actually, before I dive into chatting with you, Fabiola, I'm going to introduce myself a little bit more because I know that this is something that's going to live on the internet, and I want to make sure that folks know. So as François mentioned, I am the founder and managing director of the Haitian Creole Language Institute in New York. And I do belong to NYU. I'm also an instructor of Haitian Creole here at NYU at the Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies, which is a really amazing program. I'm part of an initiative called the Indigenous and Diasporic Language Consortium, which is basically a collaboration between NYU, Columbia, and Lehman, which is part of CUNY, the City University of New York, where we teach less commonly taught languages. So here at NYU, we offer Haitian Creole and Quechua, which is an Andean language. At Columbia, they offer Mixtec, and, at Columbia, they offer Nahuatl, and at Lehman, they offer Mixtec. So I'm really happy to be here because the work that I do is really grounded in community activism, and I always consider myself a language advocate. And so the advocacy work I do is through language. So I'm always happy to bring that fire, especially to a place like La Maison Française. And Fabiola, can I tell people how we met?
Yes, please.
Okay, so several years ago, back in like 2016, and I have proof of this on Twitter. I'm actually going to read tweets to you. So back in 2016, I was sitting in on a class, on Catherine Smith's class, and Fabiola was visiting. And so I heard that this phenomenal Haitian woman was on campus, and I was like, look, I gotta be there, I gotta be present. So I walk into the classroom, and you know, like, first of all, Fabiola is beautiful. So, you know, I was like, all right, I'm here, I'm in the right place. But then I started to really listen to what she was saying. And what really caught my attention is that you were telling people that you wanted to work with cloth, but then you decided like, no, that costs too much money. I'm gonna just work with paper instead. And then you were showing us like these beautiful pieces that you made out of paper. And I was floored. Like, I was really like, wow. Like, there's nothing Haitian women can't do. And I have to read, because I'm a huge social media person, and I think it's important that we document the work that we do as Haitian people, so that folks 20, 30 years down the line can look back and see what we've done. And so I actually quoted some things you said that day. So can I share this with the world?
I would love to know what I
said. So some of my favorite quotes from you that day. You said, this was like back in May 2016, there's ways to create magic with seemingly nothing.
Oh, I was smart back then.
It keeps going, it keeps going. You said that answering questions about your identity helped you see what your path was. Yeah, there's more. The list is long. Let me share a few more. You said so many great things. The work is to constantly challenge, challenge, challenge. I love that. Still.
Yeah.
And I have to start off with, I think, the most obvious question. It's not lost on me that we are two Haitian women sitting here at La Maison Française. And it goes without saying that there's a long history between Haiti and France that's very tumultuous. So I think I'm going to ask you the most obvious question. Why is it important to rewrite history?
Ooh, child. You know, for me, it's obviously not literal, right? I can't literally rewrite history. But there's a desire for me as a Black Haitian woman and all the other things that I am to participate in taking some sense of ownership of the narrative, or reclaiming narratives that I believe have not belonged to us. And so when I called this work Rewriting History, it was more about reclaiming the narrative and rewriting it according to some things that I believed were more true. And so because of the history of Haiti and France, you know, it was really important for me to look at Black identity through this Eurocentric lens, because we're so intertwined even today, right? You really can't, it's hard to know where to separate them sometimes.
Every year here at NYU, I have a hashtag theme for my students. I always remind people that I am a millennial. I'm an old millennial, but I'm still in that age of people where like social media is my thing. So every year I have a theme that I use to guide the work that I do academically, but also I would be lying if I didn't say that my academic work isn't also very tied to myself personally, like my own personal journeys for that time that I'm teaching. So there's some years where the hashtag theme was like hashtag rehumanizing Haiti. This year, the hashtag theme is decolonizing from within. And that idea is really a personal press for me, because I mean, I talk a good talk.
Always.
But I'm always asking myself, like, am I actually walking the walk? Like, am I actually showing up in my life and showing up to my students in a way that matches what I'm actually talking to them about and pressing them to do? So when I'm talking about decolonizing from within, I'm really talking about making shifts that start with yourself, such that those can kind of expand beyond you into your community. So in what ways has this work, and I mean, you don't usually see Black bodies in images like this, right? I mean, this is very Bridgerton, right? Well, Bridgerton before Bridgerton was a thing, right?
Yeah.
But that you don't see that. So in what ways has this helped you decolonize some of your ways of thinking? Or did that even help you do that in any way?
Well, because I was smart enough in 2016 to say that this work was very much centered on identity. I was very clear that I needed to work through my own identity as a Black Haitian woman. And when I say woman, that's not to take away from anyone who identifies differently than that. However, I really needed to understand how my light-skinnedness impacted my everyday life as a Black woman, because I understood during this work that I wanted very much to put a darker skinned woman first in the collection, which I did.
Yeah.
Who was Sharon, who was also Haitian. And actually it was Deborah
In the corner
in
there,
the
right?
corner,
Yeah, I
corner
remember
who's
that one.
Jamaican. And I re-photographed her, and then Sharon came after. Now, I was very purposeful in that decision. And that was, if we want to say it, that decolonizing within. Because it would have been easy to go to a light-skinned woman, but we know as Black women that they often are put, in front.
Yeah.
To tell a narrative, to tell our narrative. And it was very clear that I needed to start differently than that. And so all to say that at the very beginning, I was interested in doing that. I was interested in not using a model who might have easily been seen as Creole or biracial. Granted, I have to be clear that all of our shades are extremely important to me and matter. This is how we come in different shades. So one is not less important or one is not more important than the other when we're talking about shades of Blackness. But I was aware of the story that I wanted to start with and how I wanted it to be received by the public. And for me, it was about decolonizing the image that we normally see. And it needed to be a darker skinned Black woman.
Pas les choix mignons.
Oui.
I love it. I read online recently that the goal is not inclusion. I think it's amazing. I have to be very, very straightforward. I think it's amazing that your work is here, but this is not the goal. The goal is not for your work to be in a predominantly white space.
Yeah.
And the goal is freedom. That's what we're working towards as Black people. And it's something that I remind people constantly as a Haitian person, that like literally the blood that runs through me is of people who made a choice to cut their chains. Like they literally like, no, we're not doing this no more.
Yeah.
And so when you're thinking about freedom, how does your work get you there? But however you define freedom, because I think that's something that is unique to an individual, although we can also talk about like larger systemic issues and institutionalized isms. You can like insert any isms there. But how does your work get you to a space of freedom as an artist? And then I'm actually going to follow up with a question about artistry from there.
So freedom, I think we take for granted as not just a word that we throw around very loosely, but the idea of what freedom means or is. And freedom can be as simple as sitting down for a portrait. It can be as simple as wearing 8 layers of fabric if you want, because you can. It means eating cookies and all these sweets and right? So freedom doesn't always look like this very difficult and what some would see as a problematic thing that we have to fight for. Freedom is something every day to have autonomy takes shape in so many different ways. And so this work really started taking me through the different layers of and exposing what freedom actually does look like. And for me, what I came to realize was the most sincere and important level of freedom really resides on a very personal, simple level. And that's opening my eyes in the morning, listening to the birds chirp if it's spring or whenever they're out and about. I'm not getting out of bed until I feel like it, right? And understanding that anything less than that, which a lot of Black people and women have had to deal with throughout history, you don't have the freedom to lay in bed. You don't have the freedom to just breathe and catch your breath. Or you have children and you have family and you're taking on, the weight of all of society, and at the end of the day have nothing to show for it a lot of times. That became not good enough for me. And so for me, really, I answered that the question of what freedom is as an individual just doing this work.
I think about freedom all the time. It's not because I'm a Sagittarius. But I think about this, especially as a daughter of immigrants. You know, I mean, I myself am an immigrant, but I'm kind of like in that half generation that we're sometimes described as, because I came to the States when I was very young. And I think about what my parents went through just to survive being here. And just for me to get to a space where I'm just in front of some people, talking to some people and having a conversation about something that they actually like had to live through. And I think constantly about what it means to live, not just free, but abundantly, and not living from a space of scarcity, which is something that a lot of Black people have to exist. That's where a lot of Black people do exist, and where a lot of Haitian people do exist. So I think about what it means to be able to experience your art as an expression of abundance in my life. And I'm so thankful for that. I'm so thankful for that, because while your art is very emotional, I mean, especially, did you say her name was Sharon?
This one is Deborah.
Deborah. So Deborah, when you look at this image of Deborah, there's so many layers to this. Well, first of all, the dress, which you've made out of paper, which still astounds me every time. And then on top of that is the piece that's around her neck, which you can see in greater detail in the image on the back wall. And you can see it's of a man in a tree, right? Hanging in a tree. Yes. Am I correct?
Yes.
So I think about this, and I think about what it means to be able to have an artist press us to think about these realities in a way that's, I don't want to say gentle because it hits me. Especially if you're standing in front of it and you start asking yourself questions. So I want to know, how do you even get to this point? Have you always been an artist? That's really what I want to know. Have you always been an artist? Have you always been driven to produce in this way in order to get folks to have these kinds of deep self-reflective moments?
Yeah, so your questions are like the best. You can talk to me for hours. Thank you. So you brought up one of the words that I want to add or say again is the idea of scarcity, because really, thank you that it brings abundance to your life, and the work started from a place of scarcity.
Your work started from this.
Yeah, this project really started from a place of limitations, and I learned that sometimes the greatest ideas come from without. They come from within, they come from without, they come from a need, electricity and all of these wonderful, not that I'm even comparable to those
compare yourself, please.
Just saying, I didn't have access to the money and the fabrics to make these dresses, but I had an idea. And just thinking about my people, Haitian people, and our history, it became very, very important for me to use this material, because that's something that we've always had to do, create things out of scarcity, and then not just my people, but Black people in general, right? So it's been a journey. It really has been a journey of exploring how to use ugly truths or beauty to carry ugly truths. And I always say that about this work, that rewriting history really evolves into a project that is a vehicle to carry ugly truths. And because I started this project during a time when police brutality was just everywhere you looked, it was there, still there, but it was just constant every week. Black bodies not being covered, just being shown and photographed, and it's not, there's just like no respect even for the dead. And so it's like blood and gore is something that I know that we as a society have become very used to, unfortunately. And even more so when it comes to Black bodies. And I didn't want to talk about trauma that way because we get it every day anyway on TV. So I decided to use beauty as a way to bring the viewer closer into these horrible truths. Sometimes there's not this horrible, obvious, it's not always this hanging body in the frame. There's going to be hints of voodoo in there. There's going to be hints of rape or story about rape in there, or spirituality. There's this combination of things, but it's always about how to use my frame, this very, very small frame that I have, to tell something that is really important to me and tell a story. And it's either going to be this ugly truth juxtaposed to the way that I really see Black women and men. Yes. By the way, I get this question that you didn't have asked me yet, but why do I only photograph Black women and not Black men? Actually, Black men show up in the story. They're just not the physical subject at the time, but they are there. So my job as a storyteller is how to use these ugly truths and to present it in a way that's going to have people reminiscent of, when they're looking at these photographs, reminiscent of old master paintings. Because I know if I can do that, then I've already pulled them in a little bit closer to seeing something that they don't realize that they're seeing. So some psychology there, but I was a pre-med student, so I'm using some of that in my work.
I think all Haitian daughters were pre-med students.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh man, this is such heavy work. I'm reminded every day of the heaviness of the work. Even though I'm a very lighthearted person. I'm always smiling, and I feel generally like very optimistic and positive. But I'm reminded that it is work, and the work lives in my body. Like I feel I have to be very conscious about what's happening in my body. Like I carry a lot of tension, and I have to make sure to release that tension. Otherwise, the act of being a Black person in this world, in this context, in this university, it's hard. Like there's a lot that we hold on to. I think especially if some of my students, I teach Creole, and I tend to attract Black and brown students in my classroom. So in general, my class is filled with Black and brown students, Haitian students, diasporic students, Black students, students from all over Latin America and the Caribbean, students who are seeking someone who looks like me in the position that I'm in, because there aren't a lot of people who look like me in the position that I'm in. And this is challenging work. And so I have to bring us back to this space of gratitude for the work that you do as an artist, because it shows me that it's possible to do the work in a way that doesn't consume you as an individual. Instead, you're able to kind of like release that and share these beautiful works with people in a way that allows us, again, to do this very necessary self-reflection. Y'all, if y'all are not supporting Black women artists, I'm just, I'm here to say, today is that day. Today is the day that you ask yourself. I do this regular Insta story on Instagram where I tell people, okay, time to play my favorite game. And then the question is, have you supported a Black woman today? And then what I do is I go on to share like different Black women that I think need support and who are doing amazing work that deserve time, energy, and money. But I'm on a tangent now.
I love that you do that, by the way.
Oh, thank you. It's honestly, it's selfish work because I'm a Black woman.
And you're a business owner, and you're doing all the work that you're doing, and you need that support, and not even just support, because that word is a little tricky sometimes.
Yes.
But yeah, so it's all part of it, right?
It's all part of it. I'm an artist too.
Yeah.
But I don't consider myself an artist. I write, so I write.
You're an artist.
It took me a long time to kind of take on that title or describe myself in that way. But actually, I believe that all Black people are, I think Black people are the most creative groups, like the most creative group of people that I know. And the artistry is like, it's innate. And I want to talk to you about your different identities beyond your identity as an artist. So you've called yourself a Black Haitian woman, but can you tell us, like, who is Fabiola Jean Louis? I mean, we've been talking for like, what time is it? It's 6:26. We've been talking for a minute, but who are you? Like, how do you move in the world? If we didn't know you, if we hadn't been talking for some time, how would you describe yourself? And again, this is a selfish question on my part, because this is something I ask myself every day. I'm like, who am I? Like, how am I showing up in the world?
Yeah.
So I'm curious to hear your answer to that question. Lançam, vários sonhos.
No.
Se você
Well, you know, if I didn't have 5 children, it would be easier to come up with a list. But I think the thing that stands out for me, and when I think about how I would like to be remembered, which is very egotistical to think about, you know, legacy, but I would like to be known as someone who, and see myself as someone who every day tries to look at the world with childish eyes or childlike eyes, and someone who tries to retain some level of innocence. A child's innocence is what I mean. Life stops and the world stops being as fun and beautiful when we grow up. And when I say grow up, I mean grow up in ways that are very guided by society and trauma and all the other things that adults have to go through. And, you know, I learn from my children. Sometimes I fall flat on my face, and other times I'm very successful in being able to, you know, laugh at myself and be like, and honestly, that's what allows me to create the work. First and foremost is going into my studio and seeing that space as a way of healing and, you know, bringing in the energy into that work and reminding myself of how I really see the world. And how I see the world, honestly, is magical. It is not by desire necessarily that I want to talk about these hard truths. These are realities and these are facts, and I can't separate them from myself, because I'm a firm believer that in order to know where we're going or have a better understanding of where it is we want to go, we all as a collective and individually need to know where we come from. Right? And so time, this interesting concept, is always overlapping and arching in ways that we don't understand. And some people just want to look forward, or they just want to stay right here, or they just stay in the past, but it's all together. And that's what I'm trying to do in the work. And that's what I'm trying to do as an individual. So yes, to stay present every day, but then to also, you know, just let go of those societal shackles that I know are always there in everything that I do. And, you know, I try to do that as an artist.
No, the societal shackles are real.
For everyone.
Yes.
You know, and that's something that's also important, because even though I'm coming, what's coming through me is through this work as a Black woman, yes, and all the other things that I am. But I'm also a human being, right? I'm a magical creature, human being, and we all are. And there's a part of this work that is not looking to just stay on the conversation of race. It's interested in connecting to people on a more spiritual level. And so rewriting history is just one aspect of that, which is why I tend to show that, you know, the hardships showing in the chest cavity. At some point, the work is going to show more astronomical and spatial things, because we are made of stars in that way. And so, but this work is just another doorway to allow me to connect with people in a way that is beyond race.
I love that. Thank you. Can we talk about spirit for a moment?
Please.
But first, I'm going to tell a story about my mom. So my mom's name is Ghislaine, and she is a Bible-loving, very, good church woman. Like, my mom has a Bible in the kitchen, in her bedroom, in the living room, in her bag, in her car, like n'importe côté là, les zombies, and she can sit la plus vite là, sans problème. At the very same time, my mom is a Haitian woman, and it's some stuff you can't find in the Bible.
I know where you're going with that.
It's some stuff you can't find in the Bible. And she has this thing when she's looking for something, she can't find something. She's always like, oh, she's like, oh, the spirits will tell me where they are. Just very casually. It was like, the spirits will tell me where it is. Like she's looking for a car keys. Oh, the spirits will tell me. She know where she put this, the spirits will tell me. And I also, for example, I wear a matiok. I've worn this since the day I was born. Like my mom used to pin this on my diaper. And then when I got old enough for a chain, she gave me this chain. So this matiok is like my protective charm that I wear all the time. And people are always shocked, like, doesn't it, you shower with this? Like, yeah, I shower with this. I sleep with it. Like, it's on me all of the time. And this didn't come from the church. Does this duality live in you? Or are you fully like, nah, spirit guides me in all things at all of the time in all of the ways?
Oh, wow.
And please feel free to answer this however you like.
Oh, I will, because I have opinions about it. So I went to Catholic school for a very, very long time.
Right.
I spent a better part of 8-9 years in Catholic school. And it wasn't the greatest experience for me. And my parents were trying to do their best, and at the time, that's what it meant. But growing up, that really caused a rift within me as far as how I identify spiritually and my culture. Because there's that saying, what is it? 70% of Haiti is Protestant, 30% is Catholic, and 100% practices voodoo.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I didn't understand that growing up, going to Catholic school, but I did understand that I was constantly revolting against these ideas, these spiritual ideas or religious ideas. And so today, as an adult, that is a major, major, major part of my identity work that I have been doing and still do. In fact, one of my largest projects that I've ever done so far is rooted in that, where I'm doing altar shrines, and I'm doing a whole lot of research on Haitian voodoo and African-centered spiritualities, and understanding how, as not just Haitians, we came to have voodoo, where that comes from, but also how that translates in the Americas. So all of that is about unearthing these spiritual layers of who I think my people are, who my people were, and where I fall somewhere in that space. But I also have to say, to put a dot on that, or a period on that, spirituality for me has always been at the center of Black identity. And I don't think that we can have a proper conversation about freedom, Blackness, or anything about us unless we go to that place of spirituality. Because
you're really about to preach to people right now.
Because if you're looking at a country like Haiti, where it is the first Black nation in the Western Hemisphere, voodoo was used for that freedom, for the purposes of winning that war, and by all accounts, would have never been won if voodoo wasn't not at that center of it. And so when we're thinking and talking about Black identity, we have to go there, and we really have to strip away Catholicism and other influences away from that, so that we can have a better understanding of who we are as a person. So yeah, that's a whole nother talk. But spirituality is all up in that.
I feel like there are some folks who still struggle with what that means. Like, I mean, even I do. Like, there are things that my elders talk to me about, and things that spiritual elders talk to me about that I give pushback on, because I'm like, is this really what I should be doing? Like, you want me to pour libations and put the candles like this? Like, it's a lot of a lot of discomfort that comes with the stripping away of those layers. And I know that there are a lot of people who they struggle with that discomfort, but I think what you said about spirit and spirituality being at the center of Black freedom, and no one demonstrated that better than Haitian people on this side of the Atlantic. And I think if we keep that in mind, even if we just remember that spirit unites us, just the fact of working collectively and moving as a collective, that's what got us to where we were then. And that's what will get us to where we will be in the future. But as you've already mentioned, all of those aspects of time, they're all existing at the same time. Like, our Black future and our Black past are all intertwined, and they're all manifesting for us as a present, but those presents will become past, and presents will become future, etc. So I think that's a press that I say this conversation is a very selfish exercise for me. It's a press for me to ask myself questions that I hope, and this is always the hope, that I hope help me show up better for my community. And my community is many people: my family, my students, my colleagues, my husband, the people that I love. And for me, that is the work, is showing up as my best self, as much as I struggle through the discomfort of some of the things I need to do and reveal to myself to get to that best self. OK, bon, on va nous commencer demander une question, because I see that it's almost 6:40. I'm going to ask you the question I always ask Black women every time I talk to them. What do you need? How can we support you? And I'm talking about, you see the people in the room, they got time, energy, and money. What you need? What do you need? Like you, Fabiola Jean Louis, I feel like as Black women, we're always the ones carrying. But what can we carry for you? What do you need from us? What is your ask of us and everyone in this room?
That's a fantastic question. Honestly, I have a goal. Okay. Like I had a goal. I was very clear 6 years ago when we met that I wanted to be at the Met, and that happened.
I love it.
So I would like to work with NYU in some way to put on my next exhibition, and also do workshops dealing with the history of paper and or using paper pulp to build form and shape as it relates to identity and spirituality. There is something really amazing about working with paper. When we're talking about the Constitution and we're talking about currency to buy human bodies, and all the different ways that paper shifts and shapes our world. And so New York is where I am, and NYU is where I am, and I have a history with NYU. My uncle went here, and he spent his last days here before he passed. And so I'm gonna manifest that somehow, that I'd like to do some sort of work with NYU in that artistic way.
I love it. We're gonna make it happen. We're gonna make it happen.
There we go.
All right. So Fabiola, merci en pile. On aime toujours apprécier patience. Yeah. And now I'm gonna open up to questions both from, I know there are folks online and then folks in the room. Yeah. We're all yours. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Betsy.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much, Wynnie, Fabiola, for this conversation. I would like to go back to these images and with all these layers. Yes, we can see different references to the history of discrimination, of racism, and I would like to know what's your relationship to the history of art, and especially the Western history of art, because of course we can see many references in your work.
Mhm.
So could you say something about the way you see this, or you define yourself regarding this history?
So my history with art really is that I've always, and I think you did ask and I didn't answer that, I've always been an artist. I grew up in a household of a very creative father, and he taught me to try and create anything that I wanted to. So my history starts very at a very early age, and but because I come from a Caribbean household and a Black household, we're not often allowed the luxury of dreaming, if you will. And, we need to be doctors or nurses or lawyers, and I think a lot of people come from those families as well. But specifically in mine, the support for art was just not there. So later on, after becoming a mother, I went to pre-med and started doing very well in science, and I actually needed art as therapy during that time. And so what becomes a part of my art history is looking at art really as a way of therapy. And that just opened up the floodgates for me, because where I was as a young person studying art, and I went to Fashion Industries High School and studying fashion, nothing really was sinking in. And there's this true connection didn't happen until I was much older and in life, and understanding that art as therapy and understanding myself as a storyteller really is what I was interested in, how I could tell my story. So that's what impacts the work for me and helps me do the work, is understanding that I'm a storyteller first. I'm also a visual activist. And I'm not just a photographer either. I don't do singular titles. I'm a conceptual artist. And so I'm willing to teach myself anything and everything to bring an idea to light. It's really all about having a conversation with people. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for sharing your work with us, and also for discussing your process. I was really compelled by what you said about using beauty to draw the spectator in to some of the less beautiful aspects of the history and the stories behind your art. And I am also really intrigued by this sort of like duality between science and art that you employ. And as I look at the paintings, I see that you have different flowers in each of them. I think everyone has a different flower. And of course, botany and the connection to the land is extremely important in Haitian history. And so I was just, I guess, wondering if that was at all a consideration in your process, if you thought about the history of the specific plants, or the more botanical specifics.
Yeah, so I've considered specific plants in my work. Definitely in rewriting history and across the spectrum of my work. Did it go to a scientific space when it came to botany? Not necessarily, usually not. Where science really does, what I'm thinking about science in my work is the human form, the body. And my my journey of going through, because I do have a very artistic mind, but I'm also very spiritual. So there's this duality within me as an individual, and so what shows up in rewriting history and everything that I do is this kind of separating of science and spirituality, and then bringing them back together again, so that I have a better understanding of what physical trauma sometimes looks like, or spiritual trauma, or genetical trauma. And so, but botany does, or the plants represents life for me. And that's why it really does show up a lot in the work.
This is a question from our online audience member, Renee Gosson from Bucknell University, who's co-editor of the Future collection, Narrativizing Slavery in European Museums, Arts and Representations. Renee says, very happy to discover your work, Madame Jean Louis. I'm also wondering if you already have, or you would be interested in exposing your work at within slavery memory sites, museums in particular. My question, which portraits in particular could you imagine within an American or European exhibition on the slave trade or slavery? For example, Musée d'Histoire de Nantes, Musée d'Aquitaine in Bordeaux, or even the National Museum of African American History and Culture.
Fantastic set of questions, and nice to meet you. So yes, I'm very interested in that. So the images that I have in my mind, actually, I haven't yet created. They're festering as we speak, as I speak. If I have to look at or talk about rewriting history, I think they all have a place. When we're talking about slavery in America. And in fact, whether we're talking about rewriting history or the work that I've done after that or working on right now, there's this constant overlap of history that I'm always tapping into, which is how Haitian history and freedom have influenced American history. What I'm talking about is the Underground Railroad, and how many years it actually took for the truth about the Haitians' independence to reach America. And once that was found, how then that started what we now know as the Underground Railroad. And so how Black freedom is translated from the Caribbean here to America. All to say that that is, no matter what I create, whether it's rewriting history or the body of work that I'm thinking about, I think it's always going to have a place in American institutions when we're talking about freedom and slavery. So I would love to participate in anything that is shining a light on that.
I would love to see you at that museum in DC.
It's gonna happen. It is. And you know, not to cut time from someone who has another question, but I am working on this large exhibition right now that is going to be showing in Arkansas, because Arkansas is one of the stops of the Underground Railroad. And what I'll be creating is a very large ancient mausoleum that has niches, you know, like these little divots in the walls, like as if you went underground into a a cemetery or something, or cathedral, and you would see where people put, you know, vases or vessels and things. So this is going to be a life-size ancient mausoleum that looks like ruins, where the students, Black students, and other students of color in Arkansas are going to be looking at their ancestral history and finding an ancestor or someone that they can honor and create a paper pulp vessel that will go into these niches. And so the entire thing will be made out of paper, of paper pulp.
Oh, wow.
So that's the kind of work that I'm doing, and that's the kind of work that I want to go into these institutions, because that's the conversations that we need to have.
Wow, you really remind us that the depth is endless. And I think for me that's so reassuring, because sometimes I get to spaces where I'm like, well, what next? You know, like I guess I don't know what how could I resolve this thing, you know? But you're reminding us that there's always more.
We have no depth. We have no depth. I think that once we break the walls or break through the walls of our humanity, we get to a place that is so much better and more than that. And there's no depth there. So, you know, if we really understand that we're living to die, then we're doing it, you know, like we're in that space, that magical space. And that's what we can tap into to create otherworldly things. Yeah.
It's a lot, y'all.
Yes, thank you so much for this talk. I appreciate it so much. I had a question about what you said about on freedom. I like it so much because you said that it happens with very insignificant features of our life. And would you say that it is that this sense of freedom is a kind of poetic way of life, as you described it?
I think that when I hear the word poetic, it reminds me of the word romanticism. And so it's neither good nor bad. I just think that when we as a society think of freedom, we either romanticize it, right, and make it look something that we can't necessarily reach, or we look at the extreme, which is the hardships of looking at Black people, other people of color, either enslaved or, you know, having to get bashed by police or whatever. Like there's these two extremes that we have that we think about within that space of freedom. So romanticism or poetic or this very aggressive, ugly thing. When I think of freedom, I think of human rights. And it's neither poetic or romantic, and it's not this crazy, beautiful thing. It's something simply that I was born with. And I think that when we can get to that real simplicity of what freedom means, which is that we are all born autonomous individuals, and that's what we should be, no matter what, then we don't have to have these, you know, these different creative ways of seeing this natural thing.
Okay, I think we could finish here. Yeah, okay, there's no other question. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.